Hello, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel, Home to Inspire DIY and Decor. Today I will be sharing a very cute farmhouse meets shabby chic decor sign that you can use anywhere in your house. Most of the items that I will be using are from Dollartree. So the first items I have here are those galvanized metal signs, and they're sort of like a corrugated metal, as well as these farm animal LED lights. They came in the chicken, the cow, and the pig. So here you see that the pig is broken, which works out perfectly because I will be doing the same thing to the other farm animals, just taking those apart. I'm also using some napkins that came from Dollar Tree, and basically I will be using those to decoupage. I'm taking some Snow White chalk paint from Waverly, this Salty Kiss color by DIY, and that's a very pretty green color. It looks really dark in the bottle, but it dries lighter. So as I mentioned, I will be dismantling those farm animals from the rest of the pieces. I'll just be using the front portions of the animals. First thing I'll be doing is separating my napkins. You'll want to make sure that anytime you use napkins to decoupage, that you separate the plies. Some are 2 plies, some are 3 plies. Most of the stuff from Dollar Tree is 2. So you'll just want to make sure to separate those pieces. The first thing I did in order to pull the design from the napkin is I took a damp paintbrush. You'll just use any type of paintbrush and dip it into some water just to wet it a little bit. And then outlining or tracing around the design that you're going to use, you'll want to just use that as sort of like a pen, as if you were tracing something, but you're just outlining the design so that when you tear the napkin apart, it will tear more naturally as opposed to more of a purposeful looking cut. You'll see what I mean. But here I decided that I was going to paint the outer edges of the galvanized metal signs. I wanted the napkin to pop against that metal, and by painting your object or whatever it is that you're using in a bright white color or other types of white or cream color, it allows that design on the napkin to stand out a bit more. If you were to just decoupage the napkin directly onto the metal, it will be less distinct and the design will not come through as much. So this is a tip that I have for you if this is something that you want to try. So I'm just using some good old Mod Podge, and you'll want to make sure that you put enough down just so your tissue or your napkin can adhere well, but you don't want to oversaturate your piece either. Otherwise, it could be a bit messy and your napkin or paper might just end up bubbling. So you'll basically want to just cut the napkin or the design on the napkin that you want to use. So as you saw in the beginning, the napkin only had a design around the outer edges. So that's basically what I did, is I just cut around the flower design. So here I'm speeding up the process because I will repeat this process 2 more times, since this is going to be a 3-panel wall decor. And I didn't want to be repetitive in showing you the steps. So the next thing I'm taking is this paint color in the Salty Kiss and just giving each of those farm animal wood pieces a good coat of paint. Since it did have a design underneath and the paint color underneath was on the darker side, I did have to give this 2 good coats just to cover up the design and the color. So when you're painting your item with 2 coats, you'll just want to make sure that you do allow time for the item to dry completely, or you can use a heat gun like I did to speed up that drying process, and then paint the second coat over the dry paint. And again, I'm just speeding up this whole process because we've all seen how to paint, and it's basically just a basic step of just painting these items. Next thing I wanted to do was add a little more dimension, so I took my chip brush and some white chalk paint and just dry brushed each of the animals, mostly emphasizing the edges, just giving it that nice distressed look. Now you can take any color that you want to distress, like if you want black or antique brown, the Antique Wax by Waverly, you can do that. But I thought that the white is a nice contrast to this very pretty green color. Next up, I decided I'm going to add another layer, and I'm using some of this black wax by DIY, just taking a wipe and dipping that slightly into the wax and just dabbing it around the edges where the white part or the white painted surface meets the metal part of the sign. So I just added a little bit of this wax just for a little more interest and make it look a little older, more rustic. You can skip over this step if this isn't your preference or your style, but I thought that I added a little more character to this piece. So again, I'm repeating the same steps to both panels. As I mentioned, it's going to be a 3-panel sign. So what I do to the first one, I will repeat with the second and third ones. Same with the animals. So the steps are all pretty much the same. They're all repetitive. You've seen me do it to the first, and it's basically the same with the second and third. So next up, I am taking some hot glue and just gluing those animal pieces down to the galvanized metal signs. Now you can use something more permanent like E6000 or Gorilla Glue, but I thought that the hot glue was sufficient and it did its job and it is holding up. So next thing I wanted to do was, as I mentioned, create a hanging sign. So I decided to use this in a vertical fashion, and I wanted to be able to connect these pieces together. So I came up with the idea of piercing some holes or puncturing holes into the galvanized metal. So as I mentioned, I did want to make some holes on these metal signs. In order to do that, I did have to make some dots of where I wanted to puncture my holes, making sure that I placed the holes on each of the pieces in the same spot. So that's why I laid them out vertically, just making sure that everything was straight and that I had the holes lined up evenly with each of the pieces. And then using my crocodile tool, which is a scrapbooking tool, or it's a multi-purpose tool as well, comes in very handy. I did just puncture those holes using the template that I made with that pen. Then I took some jute twine, and this is what I used to connect each of the pieces together. At first, I was just going to use jute twine, but I didn't like the way it was hanging. So I felt like it needed sort of like a spacer bead, if you will. So I decided to use an unfinished wood bead in between each of the metal panels. So I'm essentially putting the jute twine into the hole that I punctured, then adding the wood bead, and then inserting the other side of that jute twine to the other piece of that metal panel, and so on and so forth. I'm repeating those same steps to each side and to each panel. And I was liking the way it was turning out so far. I think that it was a great idea to go ahead and add those beads because it definitely adds more design element to this piece. It looks very cute, gives it more of a farmhouse touch as well. Not that it already doesn't look very farmhouse, but it just really added a very nice touch. And not to mention, it does balance the piece off a little bit more as opposed to just adding jute twine, without the bead. So for a hanger, I decided to use a crochet ribbon, which Dollartree carries. And you'll want to just cut off the length that you would like your hanger to be. And then knotting the edges. I decided to knot mine towards the front of the sign as opposed to the back. But you can make your hanger any which way that you desire. But I like the look of this. So if you want your hanger to be shorter, you can definitely make adjustments as needed. So I decided to add some hot glue to the wood pieces so that they would stay and not move around so much. So I added the hot glue and then it just sort of gave it more stability. That way when I have the sign hanging or it's moving about, those wood beads aren't shifting about and just making this piece all disproportionate. And I really love the way this came out. I was very surprised at the outcome. I had this vision in my head of how I wanted this DIY to look, but I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I definitely wanted to give this farmhouse look a more shabby chic look because I'm very into that look of more like the pastels and things like that. So I wanted to make these farm animals look a little more shabby chic, more feminine, and I feel like I accomplished that. Using that green paint on those animals definitely took it up a notch and makes it look very springy and shabby chic, as well as the floral napkins that I used. You can definitely customize this to how you would like your sign to look using a different type of napkin design or a different paint color, but I think this came out adorable. I'm very happy with how it looks and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one.